Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at the thumbnail generator within the build here. So I've created a new scene called Thumb Generator that you can be found in, you go to Oasis Live, Inventory, it's the fourth one, fourth scene here, the Thumb Generator. So you just go ahead and open that up, and here you see we actually have a fire torch object, and I'll zoom into it. And all the objects we've created are in different folders here. So just like we were doing the original setup, we have the original mesh models, and then they're organized within the folder structure. And then if you come back to the inventory, we also have the created objects or items that get generated through the Inventory Pro. And then we have the geo items, which will be propagated on the map itself. So so go ahead and whatever object you're trying to generate the thumb for, go into this specific folder. And because the torch is something you hold, I put an equipable here. And I drag that in here. And what makes this work is that we've changed some functions on the actual main camera itself. So I went ahead and changed the clear flags from skybox to solid color. And that's just so it can key out this color and represent transparent space. And then I also added a script, which is called transparent render script, that and I've set the value to 1 frame and 1 to capture, because it can also capture image sequences, and then you can use it for animation and motion graphics and such for objects in like After Effects. But for this specific scenario, we're just trying to create a thumb, and so I put 1 to 1, which doesn't have to be changed. And then the important thing here is that you have to name it, and then once you name it, which shouldn't have to be changed once we do it once, let me try to pull open the folder and show you what it does. So it saves it by default in the root folder of the project. So I actually have it over here on this screen. So what's important here is you can see it generates a folder and then it keys it out. This was a mistake. I didn't have the right background queued, but then the second time around I got it. It was rendered transparent, which is awesome. We have a 3D object as an image, a PNG. But you'll notice here that every time you run it, it creates a new folder. And if it has this specific folder there, it'll just add 1 or a number to it so it doesn't overwrite it, which is a good thing. There is a couple of downsides to this method. It is in a very important hierarchy of the actual build. As you can see, this is the asset folder with all of our assets, and out here we have a lot more instructional code and scripts that help it run with the library. So it's important that when we create these thumbs that we don't delete folders or any files in here, because it can crash the whole build. You can see these screenshots are probably from previous tests, so I'll go ahead and delete those. And I will drag this out just so I have it locally, and I'll delete these as well. And so for now, this is how we're going to have to create thumbs, which isn't the optimal method, but it does allow for us to get a really good 3D render straight from the game engine that's transparent. So now that I have the thumb generated, I came ahead and just brought it into Photoshop. And what I've been doing for previous builds is I've just been opening up a somewhat high resolution for a thumbnail. It is a game thumbnail, so it doesn't have to be that huge. I usually do like 500 by 500, and you know, all of this stuff doesn't really matter. It just has to be a certain size. And then let's have to duplicate this real quick to get rid of the locked layer. And even this layer, you have to have a layer in Photoshop. That's one of the rules. So we can't delete that until we add this in. And I'll just take this and drag it in here. And you can see the image actually is pretty big. So we can probably up the thumbnail value, or we can just scale it down as we need it, because we want to try to keep the size to minimal. optimal size to run everything here. Now you see, unfortunately, because this flame is a particle effect, I can't scale it down, so it's pretty large and obnoxious. So for now, I'm just going to have it hang over the edges of the thumb. In most thumbs, we usually want to try to fill in the space, so there's it's mostly image, but we do want to leave a little bit of a gap there, so it has some space. But in something like this, I think it looks okay with this over the edge. And what I actually might do is scale it up a little bit so it's like that. And I think that's pretty cool for a thumb for this. And maybe we can even put out a slant like there, so it's like in the orientation somebody would be holding it. Now that I have this scaled and sized appropriately, I'll go ahead and just say export QuickTime to ping PNG, and I will call this fire torch thumb. And I think for the naming convention, we should use the name of the item, but then just add the thumb in the end, and make sure you have underscores under each one, because some scripts don't know how to read spaces in the values. So go ahead and save that out. And now that we have that, we can go ahead and hide Photoshop for now and come back into our game right here. Now, another important thing that we have to do is make sure we save all of the images in an area where we're gonna, like, the same folder, not in a bunch of places. Now, because I started building this a few years ago, I've been putting a lot of stuff in the game utilities, and where is it? It's menu images, but this isn't correct. Eventually, we'll have to migrate this all over somewhere else. So I think moving forward, let's go ahead and just keep everything within the subfolders constraints here, so that way we can not confuse it with the other builds for the Oasis core. So I'm going to go ahead and make thumbs folder here, and I'll go ahead and I will also bring that into the inventory. And now if we go, and I'm also going to put the hashtag here so that it bumps up in the list, and you know, and just so we know for sure what this is, image thumbs. We can call them previews, but we'll just call them thumbs for now. Okay, so now I can just right click, or maybe it's right click here. I don't even like to do it this way. I usually just drag it in directly. So I'll just minimize it a little bit, get rid of this stuff so we can see the desktop. And it's actually saved on. Okay, so here's something that came up. This is good that we're showing you. So you can see it actually, when you do a quick to ping PNG, it doesn't actually save the proportions there. You see, it messed it up. So what you actually have to do is, instead of saying QuickTime to PNG export export as, and we'll just say export that, and I will overwrite the existing thumb there, right? Replace that. It should do its thing, and then you can see now it's the right proportions, even though it says 500 by 912. That's probably not right. It'll get fixed and updated next time you open it up. So I can drag this now into the thumb folder directory, and we can go from there. Okay, so now that we have the thumb generated, you have to make sure it's a sprite. So this is another thing that sometimes I forget. Just because we imported the PNG does not mean that the game engine can correctly render the transparent values of the pixels. So we have to go up here, you select it, and you can do this in bulk. You don't have to do this one at a time. You have to come into Sprite, 2D, and UI. And then one thing you don't have to do, because we have it scaled appropriately, but you can also, where is it? There's a way to full rect, and sometimes this keeps the proportions of the original image. If you have like a canvas, it can warp it and skew it to where it's not the right size. So I'll apply that, and as you can see, it will fix the actual image that we created. Now there's transparent background on the image, which is awesome. And so for the thumb itself, I'll come back into this image or this item that we created, and I will click here. I will search for fire torch. It comes up there, and I'll click that, and voila. So now we actually have a thumb that's going to represent the torch in the inventory, which is cool. That's what we want. Since we're here, I want to point out real quick this little wizard down here, and when you click this little window will pop up, and there is some flaws with this specific system. It's really good when it's all set up, but because we're in a scene that is missing a manager here, and it thinks there's a lot of images that aren't correct, or inventory items that aren't correctly set up. So if you ever see this number in here, just don't do anything. Don't click any of these things, because you can actually screw it up in other places. I'll go ahead and make sure everything is working. What's important though is if you go back to the inventory, and I'll just save this out real quick. But then we go up to the setup here. You're going to notice that then 351 is hopefully going to go down to green. I'm hoping. Let's see if that loads in a second. Alright, it's loading. Surprising, such an empty scene needs to be loaded so long, but I think it's just caching all the previous changes in this scene, what we did, which I deleted a lot of stuff here, so that's why it takes a while. And really that's where Unity is pretty slow. If you make a lot of changes, it has to update a lot of the cache values that are in place to save the states. Alright, so it looks like, there we go. Okay, so if I go here, yeah, I don't know why that's doing that. Maybe it's actually this canvas that is working correctly. I think this has to have to be reloaded. So just to prove my point, I'm going to go back to setup here, and I'm just going to file exit real quick. And another thing to note is that when you exit Unity, it always saves the scene that you had last opened to where you propagate that, and that's another cast function. But if for some reason Unity crashes, it'll open the previous scene that was saved from the last time you closed it. So it's important that you always correctly shut down the game engine, otherwise you can lose a lot of work. And if you've been working on something for a few hours, saving the scene will obviously save the objects within it, but the actual user state that you were in last will be lost. So that's another thing that's crucial to kind of do. But my MacBook crashes a lot with Unity, especially when I'm trying to bring a bunch of components and scripts together that don't really like each other. It just kind of craps out. So it's going to load for a second, and it's definitely loading, but in the background it's probably propagating the game engine, so you wouldn't be able to see it. Give it a second. But back to like the thumbnail generator, this is definitely a useful tool to have, because having to key out 3 screen captures in Photoshop is a nightmare, especially when you have like somewhat transparent values like this, the effects of the particle here. So this tool is invaluable. There you go. So it just kind of propagated, and we'll give it a second to load back up. And another thing, let's see, hide Photoshop, look at that, and let's see if this works like I said it would. Also, what it's doing now, it's going to check for updates. So since we're using Collaborate, it does take another additional step to load all the assets within the game engine. It's not showing us like it usually does. Usually there's a bar. There it is. And then so it's just saying, all right, what is different here than the last time I was open? It's comparing the new state of the project that's been synced through Collaborate with the cache values that are saved within the libraries of the game engine. So this usually doesn't take too long, but it's one of those things where you definitely want to make sure you actually have to use it. It doesn't give you an option even to interact with the platform until it's done. But once this happens, completes, it will actually show you the state of the Collaborate tools. And mine's going to be have a blue arrow for upload because I've been making changes. So majority of the time, if you're working in the game engine, I'd say about 99% of the time, you're going to see a blue arrow here because one single change will affect the state. The only time you'll see a green check is probably right when after you finish uploading all the changes and you're closing out and opening it back up, because at that point it will be in the same state you left it. Because I've been working on this mostly myself in the past, I've rarely seen the orange arrows for pulling information from somebody else, but now that there's additional people on the team to actually help build it out, it's going to be important we really make sure that we document and be descriptive about the changes we make in the versions, and that we fully upload the changes we make, which is relatively quick. When I first was doing this, it would take a while because I had to upload 30 gigs, but now that it's only like a couple megs, it usually takes 10-20 seconds here. So you can see I have to upload the changes I've been making. And another cool little feature that I really like is that it shows you in the actual game engine here what things have been updated and need to be synced. So every little blue box here represents a change. I don't necessarily know what the side arrow versus the plus versus this means this is within this folder structure. I don't know the difference with these two really. But if I just click on this real quick, you can see it has 34 changes, and you can see all the stuff that's been modified. And then so, again, I've just been calling it Oasis Live Master Build V111 until everything's fully working. But once we start working together collaboratively, we'll start putting in the specific changes we make, such as inventory assets, thumbnail generation for a series of images, or stuff like that. So let's see if at the end of the day this did what I thought it would do. Okay, so we have 3 issues here, which isn't 0, but that's a lot less than 30 something. And if I always do a force rescan because you never know if it needs to rescan something. And I also always clear the console because you never know what script is being called somewhere else that's not going to affect your development in the specific scene here. So it's saying, okay, we have this object, the torch, there's no rarity on it, which is true because I didn't add a rarity. And it's also saying, well, what equipment type is this? I don't really know where to put it. So we'll start with the rarity here. I'll just go ahead and click on this. And if for some reason when you're using the interface, I've been noticing that when actually this input here is also built into the inventory manager here. So if I go here, you can see it's still going to give me the same resources here, but I've been noticing sometimes it doesn't save the values I set in here, but it does always do it here directly into the file. So I don't know if that's some kind of misconfigured setup I have going on with the inventory manager, but I'm not really going to worry about it now. Maybe what's important to me is that we input the specific data, the information into the actual file, and then so this can read that. So let's just do a little test here. If I go here and I say, okay, let's make that uncommon, you can see it changes them both at the same time. But sometimes when I go here, and right now I only have one category created, you can see it didn't affect this one. So what that means is when I go away, it's not going to save it. And I have to look into that because that shouldn't be happening. It should work both ways, but obviously there's some kind of misconfig there. So to fix that, I'll just go into the actual image, I'll save it, and you can see it updates it there. And if I force rescan, what do we got here? Looks like we've got a few more things happening. Alright, is acquired, equipment type. Okay, alright, so this is all the same message error 4 times. And it's looking for an equipment type, which makes sense. We haven't created any. So I'm going to go in the equipment editor right here. I'm going to click this, which is going to say create equipment type. And I'm going to name this one to, let's just say left hand. I don't know exactly what the predetermined values are, but we'll just go ahead and do that. And the equipment handler is also something I have to set up, which is already set up somewhere else. I just haven't done it here. But if we go into, just a little bit off topic from the thumbs, but we go into the inventory and I go into the database, you should see an equipment handler somewhere right here. Maybe not. Maybe I have to create it. Well, I'll worry about that later. I'm not going to include that in this video right here. But that's the reason for these errors. They're not an issue, but just keep in mind that if you have a scene that doesn't have a lot of images, it's going to propagate hundreds and hundreds of errors that are not relevant. It's not going to affect the build. So that's it. Let me know if you have any questions later.